I got yanked out of sleep at exactly 7 in the morning by someone hammering on my front door like they were serving a warrant. For one foggy, half-awake moment, I honestly thought something terrible had happened, like someone had died or there was an emergency on the street. Then I lifted the blinds and looked outside. There was Karen. She was red in the face, sweating, and dragging a bright orange extension cord across 3 different front lawns, like she was leading some kind of bizarre suburban invasion. That was the exact second I realized my morning coffee wasn't going to be nearly strong enough for whatever was about to happen. She stood in my driveway wearing slippers and workout clothes, breathing hard like she had just climbed a mountain. She started shouting that my car charger was community property and that she had every right to plug in her hybrid whenever she wanted. I just stood there for a second, blinking, coffee mug in hand, hair sticking up everywhere, trying to decide whether I was still dreaming or whether this woman had finally lost the last remaining bolt holding her together. The worst part was that she looked completely serious. One hand rested firmly on her hip, while the other gripped that extension cord like it was some kind of official legal document. She demanded that I open my garage immediately. By that point, 2 neighbors had already stepped outside in their bathrobes, and one of them had his phone up recording the whole thing. Because of course he did. Now, if you ever lived anywhere near someone like Karen, you know exactly the type. Every tiny inconvenience turns into a moral crusade. Every personal boundary somehow becomes, in their mind, a civil rights issue. Just the day before, everything had been perfectly normal. I came home from work, pulled into the driveway, plugged my car into the charger that I had personally paid to install, and went inside to have dinner with my wife. The year before that, we had installed solar panels on the house. After dealing with the installation costs, permits, inspections, and everything else, we were finally starting to see the savings. To us, it was simple. We invested in something, and eventually that investment started paying off. End of story. But to Karen, apparently, me charging my own car inside my own garage was some kind of crime against the neighborhood. She had already stopped me twice earlier that week to ask why I thought I deserved free electricity while everyone else had to pay for gas. I politely explained that there was absolutely nothing free about it. I paid for the solar panels. I paid for the charger. I paid for the electrical work to install it. And I still paid a monthly utility bill like everyone else. She dismissed those facts like they were somehow rude. Instead, she launched into a lecture about shared resources and fairness in the community. At the time, I honestly thought it was just one of those situations where someone complains about something they don't really understand. Then, suddenly, there she was at sunrise dragging that ridiculous extension cord toward my garage like she was claiming new territory. I stepped outside wearing pajama pants, and before I could even open my mouth, she launched into a long speech about HOA bylaws. She held a printed copy in her hand that had been attacked by a bright pink highlighter. She kept stabbing her finger at one specific line, like she had discovered buried treasure. According to Karen, a clause about the HOA maintaining streetlights and drainage somehow meant that electricity itself was a communal right. I looked down at the page. Then I looked back at her, and I had to bite the inside of my cheek to stop myself from laughing directly in her face. I calmly pointed out that she was completely misreading the rule. Karen immediately planted both fists on her hips and accused me of hiding behind technical language to deny her access. Then she tried a guilt trip. She said she was simply trying to help the environment by charging her hybrid vehicle. Never mind that the car's usual route seemed to be from her driveway to the hair salon and back. But sure, save the planet, Karen. By now more neighbors had wandered outside, drawn in by the noise and the spectacle. You could feel that strange buzz in the air, the mix of irritation and entertainment that happens when a neighborhood drama unfolds in real time. Karen actually tried to pull her SUV closer to my garage. In the process, she nearly drove straight over my wife's flower bed. She held up that extension cord like it was a sword and announced that I needed to do my civic duty. I told her no. Just one word. Calm and clear. No. She stomped her foot like a frustrated child and said she would find me. I reminded her that she wasn't the entire HOA board, just one particularly loud member of it. She snapped back that she practically was the board. That comment got a few laughs from the neighbors watching, which only made her angrier. So she turned toward the small crowd and launched into a full performance. She told everyone I was selfish, that I thought I was better than the rest of them, that I was hoarding electricity like some kind of suburban warlord. One neighbor leaned toward me and whispered, "This feels like bad cable TV." Honestly, he wasn't wrong. That's when my wife came outside. She walked up calmly, coffee in hand, and asked Karen why she was waking up the entire street at 7 in the morning. Karen's tone changed so fast it almost gave me whiplash. Suddenly she was sweet and reasonable, claiming she was simply trying to have a polite discussion about community energy sharing. My wife slowly looked down at the extension cord stretched halfway across the block. Then she looked back at Karen and said, "Does that look like a discussion to you?" People laughed. A couple of them even clapped. Karen spun around and stormed off, shouting that we would all regret this at the emergency HOA meeting she was calling that night. And yes, she actually did it. By evening, flyers were taped to everyone's doors. Big, bold letters announcing an emergency meeting, like we were dealing with a flood or a break-in or a gas leak. Not one woman trying to plug her car into someone else's garage. The next night, the clubhouse was completely packed, mostly because everyone knew Karen was about to embarrass herself, and nobody wanted to miss the show. She stood at the front of the room holding a stack of papers and wearing the kind of smile that suggested she believed she was about to deliver the speech of a lifetime. She started talking about fairness, equality, green energy, the future of the neighborhood. Then she pulled out poster-sized photos of my car, sitting in my driveway, and held them up like they were evidence in a criminal trial. I'm not exaggerating. She had blown up photographs of my car, like they proved some massive social injustice. I sat near the back of the room taking notes, because with people like Karen, documentation matters. My wife raised her hand and asked if Karen had even considered the safety risks involved in what she was suggesting. Karen proudly said she had done research online. That earned a ripple of laughter around the room. Then she made her grand proposal. She suggested that every electric or hybrid vehicle owner in the neighborhood should be allowed to use my charger whenever they needed it, and that I should cover the cost since I had already taken the first step. The room went silent. Not awkward silence. Complete, dead silence. A couple of Karen's usual supporters slowly started to raise their hands, but after looking around the room, they quietly lowered them again. Finally, the HOA board president cleared his throat. Normally, he avoided conflict so much that wallpaper had more backbone than he did. But even he finally said that my charger was private property and not subject to community sharing. Karen's entire face tightened. That was the moment I realized something important. This situation wasn't going to calm down. It was going to get worse before it got better. 2 days later, a neighbor texted me a photo of Karen crouched near my garage wall while I was at work. Later that same afternoon, my wife caught her trying to plug some cheap adapter into an outdoor outlet. Karen claimed the cord had accidentally fallen into the socket, which was such a ridiculous explanation that I didn't even know how to respond. That night, I noticed scuff marks near the charger. That was the moment I stopped being patient. I installed security cameras. Quiet ones. Good ones. Best money I spent that entire month. A few nights later, I was sitting in the living room, reading when the garage lights flickered. I ran out there and found Karen halfway inside my garage holding a strange knockoff adapter that looked like it had been included free with a terrible decision. She froze when she saw me. Then she calmly announced that she was conducting an inspection. An inspection inside my garage. Smoke was already curling out of the outlet. I yelled for her to step back, cut the breaker, and my wife snapped photos while Karen coughed dramatically and somehow still managed to blame me for not labeling my equipment better. The next morning, that camera footage quietly spread through the neighborhood, person to person. No announcements, just quiet sharing. Karen had spent years making everyone miserable. Now everyone had front row seats to her nearly setting herself on fire in my garage. People started calling her Sparky behind her back. I'm not proud of it, but I laughed. You'd think that level of embarrassment would slow someone down. Not Karen. If anything, it made her double down. She started stuffing mailboxes with flyers about energy fairness. She walked around the neighborhood with a clipboard asking people to sign a petition demanding access to my garage. She even invented fake statistics, telling people that 90% of the neighborhood supported her. Interestingly, that number changed depending on who she was talking to. Around that time, my wife invited a licensed electrician to inspect the outlet Karen had damaged. A few neighbors gathered while he explained, in very simple language, why plugging random vehicles into someone else's setup using cheap adapters was dangerous. He even pointed out the scorch marks on the outlet. And that's when the situation took another strange turn. Karen had been lurking nearby the whole time, just waiting. She suddenly marched over and accused the electrician of being on my payroll. Then she declared, "Science has been wrong before." The electrician blinked at her slowly, looked over at me, and quietly muttered, "You can't outwire stupid." That line spread to the neighborhood faster than wildfire. Not long after that, Karen attempted her boldest stunt yet. I was in the backyard grilling when I heard a strange humming noise coming from the garage. I ran inside and saw her SUV halfway up my driveway with some bizarre splitter device jammed into my Charger. The thing looked like a tangled pile of wires and duct tape had somehow assembled itself into a machine. Living in an Karen HOA sat behind the wheel grinning, real mixed bag. She had just won a court case. On one hand, then you get manicured lawns. Her headlights flashed. On the dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. You get the fun police dictating everything from the color of your mailbox to the length of your grass. A harsh chemical smell starts with a simple yet frustrating problem. Smoke started drifting out from our private road. Karen designed for a quiet residential speed that I had sabotaged 25 miles per hour. My neighbor crossed somehow. It had apparently learned to keep his phone ready at all times. Our HOA president was already recording. Every single day, like clockwork. It wasn't. His silver sedan would come flying down the road. Karen actually cried. We're not talking a little real tears. She claimed 60, she was being oppressed by sometimes 70 miles per hour. She accused me of booby trapping my own kids play on this street. She insisted the footage was fake. The electrician was fake. The noise modern technology itself. I tried ruining America route first. It might have been funny if there hadn't been something darker beneath it all. Hey, the kind of stubbornness where someone's speed limit signs completely overrides their common sense. In the newsletter about Karen safety, started telling people Mr. Harrison, Charger, sitting at the head of the table like a king on his throne. I showed the paperwork. Waved me off. She said inspectors were coming. He claimed there was no speeding problem. She kept said I was being overly sensitive, taking notes, and that the road was muttering to herself. Staring at the garage like if I was personally offended her family. Maybe I should be more watchful. Then came the Saturday that finally wasn't just me who noticed. I returned several neighbors that complained too. Smell burnt but he shut them down before I even reached the porch. That's when I realized being bitter and unmistakable wasn't going to work. I walked around Mr. Harrison felt untouchable, and there she was again. He was the president, half on my property. Clutching another mangled extension cord. I was going to provide SUV was crooked near the garage. My first thought was to record with my front end, but I knew that wouldn't be against the wall outlet. He could argue the angle was panicking, but still yelling that everything was my fault. I needed something official. I ran over something he couldn't dispute. My wife went online and found a professional grade tripod-mounted radar gun. Suddenly, my yard was crowded with sheriff's deputy. It wasn't fire marshal, but the thought of the look on Mr. Harrison's face and half the neighborhood red-handed watching like they had front row seats. A few days later, Karen tried delivering the same speech again. It felt like the same righteous tone, but for petty revenge. Same highlighted HOA I spent the afternoon setting it up in my front yard. But this time it ended quickly. Partially hidden behind a fire marshal examined the outlet. With a clear line of sight down the melted cord in her hand. I calibrated and calmly explained that she had caused the damage herself. At exactly 25 miles per hour. The code inspector confirmed that the HOA had absolutely no authority to wait for my private electrical to make his grand entrance. Then the deputy asked around 5:30 p.m. I handed him a USB of an engine. By that point, I had learned to keep records. He watched the video of Karen and the shady electrician she had hired sneaking onto my property late at night with tools, trying to splice into my Charger line. In the footage, you could see the guy back away right before the wiring failed. The second the car started smoking, he ran, left Karen standing there alone. That moment changed the entire mood of the crowd. Suddenly, Karen wasn't just annoying. She was reckless, dangerous. Someone willing to risk burning down half the block just to win an argument. The deputy issued citations for trespassing, tampering, and reckless endangerment. The HOA held another meeting the following evening. And for once, there was no hesitation, no procedural drama, no fake neutrality. The board president presented the facts. The footage was played. The room gasped and laughed in all the appropriate places. Then the board voted. Unanimously, her proposal was dead. She was heavily fined and removed from the HOA board. Just like that. The woman who had strutted around the neighborhood like she owned it now sat there with clenched teeth and trembling pearls, while everyone else finally stopped pretending she was simply misunderstood. A week later, her SUV was towed away. The battery was completely fried. I installed a steel lock box around my Charger along with motion sensors. Not because I believed Karen still had another move left, but because I had finally learned not to underestimate crazy mixed with entitlement. And you know what I realized after all of that? Some people don't actually want fairness. What they want is access to whatever you built, whatever you paid for, whatever you worked to protect. And when you say no, they call it selfishness. Boundaries offend the people who benefit from you having none. The sweetest moment came later. At the neighborhood barbecue, kids were drawing little lightning bolts on the sidewalk with chalk. Adults were still quoting Karen's energy democracy speech in terrible dramatic voices. For the first time in a long while, the whole block felt relaxed. Karen walked past quietly with her head down. No speeches, no clipboard, no audience, just silence. And I'll admit something. Watching her pass my locked Charger without saying a single word felt better than any apology ever could. So let me ask you something. When someone keeps crossing the line and hiding behind rules they barely understand, where do you think justice ends and karma begins? And have you ever dealt with someone so entitled that they would rather wreck their own life than admit they were wrong? If you've experienced anything even remotely like this mess, I'd honestly love to hear about it.